The air in the grand auction hall of Zix-9 was thick with tension and greed. The room buzzed with the murmurs of alien merchants, slavers, and collectors, their strange voices blending into an eerie symphony. Strange creatures shuffled about, their forms ranging from towering insectoids to shimmering jellyfish-like beings suspended in floating tanks. At the center of it all stood a raised platform where items, and sometimes people, were sold off to the highest bidder. Today's offering was particularly unusual. A human woman, her face bruised but her eyes blazing with defiance, stood chained on the podium. Her tattered clothes hung loosely on her frame, evidence of weeks spent enduring harsh conditions. She had been captured months ago while trying to escape Earth as a stowaway aboard a smuggler's ship. Now she found herself here at the mercy of beings who saw her as nothing more than a curiosity, or worse, a joke. "To your left," barked one of the auctioneers, a squat reptilian creature with scales that gleamed under the harsh lights. He gestured toward the woman with a clawed hand. "Lot number 42, a specimen of Homo sapiens, commonly referred to as human. Bidding starts at 5 credits. 5 credits, the crowd erupted into laughter. To most species in this part of the galaxy, humans were insignificant, a primitive race barely capable of leaving their own planet. Their technology lagged behind even the smallest factions of the galactic community, and their culture seemed chaotic compared to the structured societies of other races. For many aliens, purchasing a human was less about acquiring value and more about owning something exotic, like buying a rare flower just to crush its petals for sport. "She's worthless," sneered a spindly arachnid-like trader, clicking his mandibles loudly enough for everyone to hear. His comment drew more chuckles from the crowd. Others joined in, jeering and mocking the frail figure standing silently on the stage. Kayla didn't flinch. Despite the chains binding her wrists and ankles, despite the pain radiating through her body from injuries sustained during her capture, she refused to let them see her break. Her jaw tightened, and her dark eyes scanned the room with quiet intensity. She wasn't afraid, not entirely. Fear would only fuel their amusement, and Kayla knew better than to give them that satisfaction. 5 credits, repeated the auctioneer, his tone bored now. "Do I hear 6? A few half-hearted bids trickled in, mostly from younger traders eager to impress their elders by making frivolous purchases. 7 credits. 8. 10. Still, no serious interest emerged. Aliens whispered, amongst themselves, shaking their heads or outright laughing whenever someone dared raise the price. It was clear they viewed her as little more than a novelty item, an amusing trinket to display briefly before discarding. Then from the back of the room came movement. A figure cloaked in shadow detached itself from the wall and stepped forward. The fabric of the cloak swirled around him, obscuring his features except for a pair of piercing blue eyes visible beneath the hood. Silence fell over the crowd as he approached the front, his presence commanding attention without a single word spoken. "I'll take her," said the figure, his voice calm but firm. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small pouch filled with glittering gold coins. Dropping it onto the table beside the auctioneer, he added, "Full price." The room went utterly still. Full price? For a human? The auctioneer blinked, stunned. "Sir, are you certain?" he stammered, glancing nervously between the mysterious buyer and the rest of the audience. Even the other bidders looked baffled, leaning forward in their seats to get a better look at the man who valued a human so highly. Without hesitation, the cloaked figure nodded. "Absolutely." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some aliens exchanged confused glances while others whispered furiously about the absurdity of such generosity. One burly quadrupedal creature snorted loudly, muttering, "What a waste of credits." But the cloaked figure ignored them all, his focus unwavering. As the transaction was finalized, the auctioneer announced, "Sold, to the human." Gasps echoed throughout the hall. No one had expected another human to intervene. Most assumed the cloaked figure belonged to some obscure alien race, given how rarely humans ventured beyond their home system. Yet there he stood, unmistakably human, claiming ownership of someone who had moments ago been dismissed as worthless. Kayla's heart raced as she watched him ascend the steps to the podium. Was this rescue real, or was she simply being passed from one captor to another? There was no way to know yet, but something about the way he carried himself gave her hope. He moved with purpose, his steps steady and confident as if he owned not just this moment but the entire universe. When he finally stopped in front of her, Kyla lifted her chin defiantly, meeting his gaze head-on. Up close, she could see the lines etched into his weathered face, the faint scars marking his skin. This man had seen hardship, perhaps even fought battles she couldn't imagine. And yet there was kindness in his expression, a spark of recognition as if he understood exactly what she'd endured. "My name is Elias Venn," he said softly, unlocking her chains with a device hidden in his sleeve. "You're free now." For a moment, Kayla didn't respond. Free? After everything she'd been through, the betrayal, the beatings, the humiliation, it almost felt too good to be true. But then slowly she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. Elias offered her a small smile. "Don't thank me yet. Freedom isn't free. You'll have to earn it." With that cryptic remark, he turned and walked away, motioning for her to follow. As Kyla stepped down from the podium, the weight of countless eyes bore into her back. She could feel their stares, their disbelief, their disdain, but none of it mattered anymore. For the first time in what felt like forever, she dared to believe she might actually survive this nightmare. And maybe, just maybe, she'd prove every last one of them wrong. The journey from the auction hall to Elias Venn's ship, the Eclipse Dawn, was a blur for Kayla. The streets of Zix-9 were a chaotic maze of neon lights, alien vendors shouting in incomprehensible languages, and towering structures that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkened sky. Her legs felt weak beneath her, not just from exhaustion but from the overwhelming realization that she had been bought, not sold off as trash, but purchased with purpose. As they walked, Kayla studied Elias closely. He moved with an easy confidence, his cloak billowing slightly behind him as he navigated the crowded thoroughfare. His face was rugged, marked by years of hardship, yet there was something warm about his demeanor, a quiet strength that made her want to trust him. Still, trust wasn't something Kayla gave easily, especially now. She kept her guard up, watching every step he took, every glance over his shoulder. When they finally reached the docking bay, Kayla caught her first glimpse of the Eclipse Dawn. It wasn't sleek or polished like the gleaming starships owned by the galaxy's elite. Instead, it was patched together with mismatched panels and exposed wiring, its surface scarred from countless battles and repairs. To anyone else it might have looked like a piece of junk, but to Kayla it was beautiful. This ship wasn't meant to impress, it was built to survive. "This is home," Elias said simply, gesturing toward the boarding ramp. "For now anyway." Kayla hesitated at the threshold, her mind racing. Was this truly freedom? Or was she walking into another cage, albeit one disguised as salvation? Sensing her unease, Elias turned to face her, his expression softening. "You don't have to come if you don't want to," he said. "But out there," he pointed back toward the bustling city, "you'll either end up dead or enslaved. Again. Here, you've got a chance. A real one." His words struck a chord deep within her. He wasn't offering false promises or empty platitudes. He was giving her a choice. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone was treating her like a person rather than property. Taking a deep breath, Kayla stepped onto the ramp and followed him inside. The interior of the Eclipse Dawn was as unconventional as its exterior. The walls were lined with salvaged parts and makeshift gadgets, evidence of countless improvisations. Strange symbols etched into the bulkheads hinted at encounters with alien cultures, while faint hums and whirs suggested the ship was alive with activity. In the main hold, a group of aliens lounged around a central table, engaged in animated conversation. They fell silent when Elias entered, their eyes immediately locking onto Kayla. "This is Kayla," Elias announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She's with me." The crew exchanged skeptical glances. There was Yorick, a hulking, quadrupedal alien with fur-covered limbs and tusks protruding from his lower jaw. Beside him sat Lyra, a slender amphibian-like being whose translucent skin shimmered faintly under the dim lighting. At the far end of the table was Tazik, a wiry, insectoid creature whose multifaceted eyes glittered with curiosity. Completing the group was Rin, a humanoid engineer with cybernetic enhancements covering half her body. "She's human?" Lyra asked, tilting her head curiously. Her voice carried a melodic lilt, almost musical. "Why did you bring her here?" "She needed help," Elias replied matter-of-factly. "And we can use another pair of hands if she proves herself." Prove herself. The phrase hung heavy in the air, and Kayla felt the weight of their stares pressing down on her. These weren't ordinary sailors or merchants. They were survivors, each bearing scars, physical and otherwise, that spoke of struggles she couldn't begin to comprehend. Yet none of them trusted her, and why should they? To them, she was just another burden, another mouth to feed. "Fine," Kayla said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady despite the storm raging inside her. "What do I need to do?" Elias smirked faintly, clearly pleased by her response. "Start small. Rin will show you around. If you're willing to work, you'll earn your place." Over the next few days, Kayla threw herself into learning everything she could about the ship and its crew. Rin, though initially reluctant, took it upon herself to teach Kayla the basics of engineering. Together, they crawled through narrow, maintenance tunnels, repairing faulty conduits and recalibrating outdated systems. Kayla quickly discovered that the Eclipse Dawn was held together more by ingenuity than design, and she marveled at how the crew managed to keep it running against all odds. Her natural problem-solving skills impressed even Rin, who grudgingly admitted, "You're not half bad for a human." Meanwhile, Kayla began forming tentative bonds with the others. Jorik, despite his intimidating appearance, had a surprisingly gentle nature, often sharing stories of his homeworld during late-night shifts. Lyra taught her simple phrases in her native tongue, laughing whenever Kayla stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds. Even Tazik warmed up to her after she helped decipher a damaged data module containing vital navigation charts. But not everyone was so welcoming. Some members of the crew remained distant, their distrust lingering like a shadow. During meals, Kayla noticed subtle gestures, a seat left vacant beside her, a muttered comment too low for her to catch. She didn't let it bother her, though. She knew earning their respect would take time, and she was determined to prove she belonged. That opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, while the crew gathered in the common area to relax, alarms blared throughout the ship. Pirates. A squadron of raiders had detected the Eclipse Dawn's energy signature and was closing in fast. The crew sprang into action, scrambling to prepare for battle. Weapons were distributed, shields activated, and defensive protocols initiated. Kayla stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. She had never been in a space battle before, let alone against pirates known for their ruthlessness. But then she remembered Elias's words. Freedom isn't free. Summoning every ounce of courage, she approached Rin, who was frantically working at a console. "What can I do?" Kayla asked, her voice firm despite the chaos erupting around them. Rin glanced up, surprised but grateful for the offer. "We need to reroute power to the rear cannons. Can you handle it?" Kayla nodded. "Show me where." With Rin's guidance, Kayla climbed into the cramped access tunnel leading to the weapon systems. Sparks flew as enemy fire struck the hull, shaking the ship violently. Ignoring the danger, Kayla focused on the task at hand, her fingers moving swiftly over the wires and circuits. Sweat dripped down her forehead, and her muscles ached from contorting herself into impossible positions, but she refused to give up. Finally, she succeeded. Power surged to the rear cannons just as the pirates launched another attack. The Eclipse Dawn retaliated, sending a barrage of plasma blasts that crippled two of the enemy ships. Cheers erupted from the crew as the remaining raiders retreated, unwilling to risk further losses. When Kayla emerged from the tunnel covered in grease and grime, the crew greeted her with astonished looks. Elias clapped her on the shoulder, a proud grin spreading across his face. Not bad for your first fight, he said. Jorik let out a low rumble of approval, while Lyra tilted her head thoughtfully. Perhaps humans aren't as fragile as we thought. Even Tazik clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement, a rare sign of respect among his kind. For the first time since arriving, Kayla felt like she truly belonged. As the adrenaline faded and the ship returned to normalcy, Kayla reflected on what had happened. She hadn't just survived, she had contributed. Her actions had made a difference, proving that she was capable of standing alongside the crew, not as a burden, but as an equal. Later that night, as she lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, she allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. After all, she reminded herself, she was worth more than gold. In the weeks following the pirate attack, Kayla became an integral part of the Eclipse Dawn. Her quick thinking and resourcefulness during the battle had earned her not just respect, but a sense of belonging among the crew. No longer was she seen as a charity case or a burden. She was now one of them, a survivor who could hold her own in even the toughest situations. Elias took it upon himself to mentor her further, teaching her skills that went beyond basic repairs and maintenance. Under his guidance, Kayla learned advanced piloting techniques, tactical strategies for space combat, and how to navigate the treacherous politics of interstellar trade routes. She soaked up every lesson like a sponge, determined to prove herself worthy of the trust they'd placed in her. The Eclipse Dawn wasn't just a ship, it was a family. Each member brought something unique to the table, and Kayla soon realized her role was evolving into something special. While Rin excelled at engineering and Jorik's brute strength made him invaluable in physical confrontations, Kayla's greatest asset was her ingenuity. She had a knack for turning scraps into solutions, creating tools and weapons from what others would dismiss as junk. Her creativity reminded Elias of why he'd chosen her back at the auction hall, not because she was human, but because she carried within her the spark of resilience that defined humanity itself. One day, while the Eclipse Dawn docked at a remote outpost for supplies, Kayla wandered through the bustling marketplace alongside Lyra. The amphibian-like alien moved gracefully between stalls, haggling with vendors in their native tongues. Kayla marveled at the diversity of life around her. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and colors bartering, arguing, and laughing together. It was a stark contrast to the cold indifference she'd encountered at the auction hall. As they browsed, Kayla noticed a stall selling outdated tech components, broken droids, cracked control panels, and tangled wires. Most passers-by ignored it, dismissing the items as useless debris. But Kayla saw potential. Picking up a damaged drone chassis, she examined it closely, tracing the grooves where circuits once connected. With some work, this scrap could be transformed into something functional, perhaps even revolutionary. "How much for this?" she asked the vendor, holding up the drone. The creature behind the counter, a gelatinous blob with multiple eye stalks, pulsated lazily before responding in a garbled voice. 5 credits, Kayla smirked. 5 credits. The irony wasn't lost on her. That was the same starting bid placed on her life at the auction. Shaking her head, she handed over 10 credits instead. The vendor squirmed in delight, clearly pleased with the unexpected generosity. Back on the ship, Kayla set to work. Using spare parts scavenged from the Eclipse Dawn storage bay, she began piecing together the drone. Hours turned into days as she meticulously soldered wires, rewrote corrupted code, and tested each modification. By the time she finished, the drone was unrecognizable. Sleek and compact, it now featured retractable blades, sensory arrays capable of detecting hidden threats, and a self-repair mechanism powered by nanobots. When she presented her creation to the crew, jaws dropped. Even Rin, who prided herself on her technical expertise, couldn't hide her astonishment. "This shouldn't be possible," she muttered, inspecting the drone's inner workings. "Where did you learn to do this?" Kayla shrugged modestly. "I didn't learn it. I just figured it out." Her invention quickly proved its worth. During a routine supply run, the drone detected a concealed minefield surrounding a derelict cargo vessel. Thanks to its warning, the Eclipse Dawn avoided disaster, salvaging valuable goods without incident. From that moment on, the drone, nicknamed Scrapper by Tazik, became an essential tool aboard the ship. Word of Kayla's growing reputation began to spread beyond the confines of the Eclipse Dawn. Stories of the worthless human who had risen above her circumstances reached nearby sectors, sparking curiosity among other traders, pirates, and explorers. Some dismissed the tales as exaggeration, but others viewed them as proof that humans might possess untapped potential after all. Among those intrigued was a group of rogue engineers known as the Free Coders Guild, operating outside the strict regulations imposed by larger galactic powers. The guild specialized in modifying technology to suit unconventional needs. When rumors reached them about a human capable of crafting ingenious devices from scrap, they sent an envoy to meet her. The envoy arrived during a brief stopover at a neutral space station. A sleek shuttle docked alongside the Eclipse Dawn, and out stepped a humanoid figure clad in shimmering silver armor. Their face was obscured by a helmet equipped with glowing visors, giving them an almost robotic appearance. "I am Zenara," the figure said, removing their helmet to reveal sharp features framed by short-cropped white hair. "My guild has heard of your work. We wish to discuss collaboration." Kayla exchanged a glance with Elias, who nodded encouragingly. Stepping forward, she extended her hand. "I'm Kayla. What kind of collaboration are we talking about?" Zenara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Our clients often require custom modifications under tight deadlines. Your ability to innovate under pressure makes you uniquely qualified. Join us, and you'll have access to resources far beyond what you currently possess." It was tempting, an opportunity to expand her skills and make a real impact in the galaxy, but Kayla hesitated. The Eclipse Dawn had become more than just a refuge for her. It was home. Leaving meant abandoning the people who had given her a second chance when no one else would. "I appreciate the offer," she said finally, "but my place is here. If you're looking for someone to collaborate with, though, I'm open to discussing projects." Zenara studied her for a moment before nodding. "Very well. We will contact you when the need arises." After the meeting, Elias approached Kayla, his expression thoughtful. "You handled that well," he said. "Most people would jump at the chance to join the Free Coders Guild. Why didn't you?" "Because this is where I belong," Kayla replied without hesitation. "Besides, I think we've got plenty of challenges ahead without needing to chase new ones." She was right. Trouble was already brewing. Unbeknownst to the crew, whispers of Kayla's exploits had reached less than friendly ears. Back on Zix-9, the slavers who had sold her at auction were furious about the humiliation they'd suffered. To them, Kayla represented everything they despised about humans: unpredictability, defiance, and sheer audacity. Determined to reclaim their dignity, and perhaps exact revenge, they hired a notorious bounty hunter named Vrax to track her down. Vrax was infamous for his ruthlessness and efficiency. Equipped with cutting-edge weaponry and a fleet of heavily armed drones, he left destruction in his wake wherever he went. His mission was simple: capture the human known as Kayla and deliver her back to Zix-9 alive, or eliminate her if necessary. The first sign of trouble came during a hyperspace jump. As the Eclipse Dawn emerged from the lightspeed tunnel, alarms blared throughout the ship. On the view screen, a squadron of sleek black fighters loomed ominously, their markings unmistakably those of Vrax's private army. "We've got company," Elias announced grimly, taking his seat at the helm. "Everyone to battle stations." Kayla rushed to the engineering bay, her mind racing. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Without reinforcements or a miracle, the odds were stacked against them, but Kayla refused to give in to despair. There had to be a way to turn the tables. Spotting Scrapper hovering nearby, she snapped her fingers. "That's it!" she exclaimed. Grabbing a toolkit, she began reprogramming the drone, uploading new protocols designed specifically for sabotage. Within minutes, Scrapper was ready. "What are you planning?" Rin asked, watching as Kayla activated the drone's stealth mode. "A distraction," Kayla replied with a grin, "and maybe a little payback." Launching Scrapper into space, she directed it toward the enemy ships. Invisible to sensors, the drone slipped past their defenses and latched onto one of the lead fighters. Moments later, chaos erupted as Scrapper unleashed a barrage of EMP pulses, disabling the fighter's systems and causing it to collide with another ship. The resulting explosion created a chain reaction, forcing the remaining vessels to scatter. Seizing the opportunity, Elias maneuvered the Eclipse Dawn into position, firing precision shots that crippled several more fighters. With their formation, broken, Vrax's forces retreated, unwilling to risk further losses. As the dust settled, the crew erupted into cheers. Kayla leaned against the console, breathing heavily but smiling triumphantly. Once again, she had proven that humans weren't just survivors, they were innovators, fighters, and dreamers. Later that night, as the stars streaked past the viewport, Kayla reflected on how far she'd come. From being mocked as worthless to standing shoulder to shoulder with aliens who once doubted her, she had carved out a place for herself in a universe that hadn't wanted her. But this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, countless others, like her, were waiting for their chance to shine, and Kayla vowed to ensure they wouldn't have to wait much longer. The victory over Vrax's forces was short-lived. Though the Eclipse Dawn had managed to escape with minimal damage, Kayla knew this wasn't the end. Bounty hunters like Vrax didn't retreat easily. They regrouped, refueled, and came back stronger. The slavers who had hired him wouldn't rest until they reclaimed their property, no matter how much bloodshed it took. As the crew patched up the ship in the aftermath of the battle, tension hung heavy in the air. Yorick paced anxiously near. The weapons console, his massive frame casting long shadows across the dimly lit hold. Lyra hovered silently by the viewport, her shimmering skin reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. Even Rin, usually calm and methodical, seemed restless as she worked on repairing a damaged engine panel. Kayla sat at the main table, staring intently at a holographic map of nearby sectors projected above its surface. Her mind raced with possibilities. They couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later they'd run out of fuel, supplies, or sheer luck. If they were going to survive, they needed a plan, a way to turn the tables on their pursuers. "What do you think?" Elias asked, pulling up a chair beside her. His voice was low but steady, betraying none of the fatigue etched into his weathered face. "Any ideas?" Kayla nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving the map. "We need to stop reacting and start acting," she said. "They're hunting us because they see us as prey. It's time we showed them otherwise." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You've got something in mind?" "I do," Kayla replied, her tone firm. "But it'll be risky." "Riskier than facing Vrax again?" Tazik interjected from across the room, his mandibles clicking impatiently. "Because I'm not sure that's possible." "It is," Kayla admitted. "But if we pull it off, we won't just survive. We'll send a message. To the slavers, to Vrax, and to anyone else who thinks humans are easy targets." Her words silenced the room. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to admire her boldness or question her sanity. Finally, Elias leaned back in, his chair folding his arms thoughtfully. "All right," he said after a pause. "Let's hear it." Kayla's plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. She proposed luring Vrax's fleet into an asteroid field, located along one of the most perilous trade routes in the sector. The dense cluster of rocks would limit their mobility, forcing them to break formation and fight individually. Meanwhile, the Eclipse Dawn, smaller, faster, and more agile, could use the terrain to their advantage, striking quickly and retreating before the enemy could retaliate. To make the trap even more effective, Kayla suggested deploying decoys, modified drones programmed to mimic the ship's energy signature. These would scatter throughout the field, creating confusion and drawing fire away from the real vessel. While the enemy focused on chasing illusions, the crew could strike critical blows against their command ships. "It's crazy," Rin muttered, shaking her head as she reviewed the schematics Kayla had sketched out. "But it might actually," Work. That's what makes it so brilliant, Kayla shot back with a grin. They won't expect it. Preparations began immediately. The crew worked tirelessly, modifying Scrapper and several other drones to serve as decoys. Kyla spent hours programming complex algorithms into their systems, ensuring they could evade detection and replicate realistic flight patterns. Rin upgraded the ship's shields and weapons, while Jorik reinforced the hull with salvaged plating, scavenged from derelict vessels. Lyra monitored communications channels, searching for any sign of Vrax's movements. And Tazik scouted the asteroid field, mapping potential choke points and ambush sites. Throughout it all, Kyla remained at the center of the operation, coordinating efforts and offering solutions whenever problems arose. Her leadership surprised even herself. Just weeks ago, she had been a prisoner, mocked as worthless by those who saw her as nothing more than a curiosity. Now she stood shoulder to shoulder with aliens who trusted her implicitly, relying on her ingenuity to save them all. When the time came, the crew positioned themselves at the edge of the asteroid field, waiting for their enemies to arrive. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of static from the comm system. Then finally, a transmission broke through. "This is Vrax. Surrender the human or prepare to die." The message was brief but chilling. Kayla clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. This was it, the moment she'd been preparing. "For deploy the decoys," Elias ordered, his voice tight with anticipation. With a flick of a switch, dozens of drones launched from the Eclipse Dawn, spreading out across the field like sparks igniting a firestorm. On the view screen, red blips representing enemy ships swarmed toward the false signals, splitting apart as they gave chase. "Now!" Kayla shouted. The Eclipse Dawn surged forward, weaving through the jagged asteroids with precision that bordered on artistry. Elias piloted the ship with unmatched skill, dodging collisions and exploiting every shadowy crevice to remain hidden. Meanwhile, Kayla coordinated attacks from the tactical station, directing bursts of plasma fire at vulnerable points in the enemy formation. One by one, Vrax's ships fell victim to the chaos. Fighters collided with asteroids, their pilots unable to react quickly enough to avoid disaster. Larger vessels found themselves trapped between floating boulders, immobilized and helpless, as the Eclipse Dawn picked them off with surgical strikes. For every direct hit, Kyla felt a surge of vindication, not just for herself, but for every human who had ever been dismissed as weak or insignificant. Then came the moment of truth. Through the debris, Vrax's flagship emerged, its sleek design bristling with cannons and turrets. It was bigger, faster, and far deadlier than anything they'd faced so far. But Kayla wasn't afraid. If anything, she felt a strange sense of exhilaration. This was the culmination of everything she'd fought for since stepping aboard the Eclipse Dawn. This was her chance to prove once and for all that humanity wasn't something to be underestimated. "Target their engines," she instructed, sharply. "If we can disable them, we'll have the upper hand." Elias nodded, guiding the ship into position. As the flagship loomed closer, Kayla activated the final phase of her plan. A concentrated EMP pulse designed to overload the enemy's systems. With precise timing, she triggered the device, sending a wave of electromagnetic energy rippling through space. Lights flickered across the flagship's hull as its defenses faltered, leaving it exposed and defenseless. Seizing the opportunity, Elias maneuvered the Eclipse Dawn alongside the crippled vessel. A boarding tube extended, connecting the two ships. Without hesitation, Kayla grabbed a weapon and led the charge, flanked by Jorik and Tazik. Inside the flagship, resistance was fierce but disorganized. Crew members scrambled to respond, only to be overwhelmed by the combined strength and strategy of the invaders. At last, Kayla confronted Vrax himself in the flagship's command center. The bounty hunter stood tall, his armor gleaming despite the chaos surrounding him. In his hands, he held a deadly-looking rifle aimed squarely at her chest. "You should have stayed out of my way," he growled, his voice dripping with menace. Kayla met his glare without flinching. "And you should have left me alone." For a moment, neither moved. Then, with a roar, Vrax lunged forward. But Kayla was ready. Ducking beneath his swing, she countered with a swift kick to his knee, sending him stumbling backward. Before he could recover, she disarmed him with practiced ease, pressing the barrel of her own weapon against his helmet. "It's over," she said firmly. "Call off your men." Vrax hesitated, then reluctantly complied. Over the comms, his voice echoed through the ship. "Stand down. We're done here." Back aboard the Eclipse Dawn, the crew celebrated their hard-fought victory. Cheers erupted as they watched Vrax's remaining forces retreat, their flagship now under Kayla's control. For the first time in days, laughter filled the air, replacing the tension that had gripped them all. Elias approached Kayla, clapping her on the shoulder. "You did good," he said, pride evident in his voice. "Better than good. You turned the tables on them." Kayla smiled faintly, though her expression remained thoughtful. "This isn't just about me," she replied. "It's about showing everyone that humans aren't weak. We don't give up. We fight back." As the Eclipse Dawn soared away from the battlefield, leaving behind a trail of defeated foes, Kayla gazed out at the stars. Somewhere out there, countless others like her were still fighting for freedom, dignity, and respect. And thanks to her actions today, maybe, just maybe, they'd find the courage to believe they could win too. The victory over Vrax and his forces rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. News of the battle spread quickly, carried by traders, scavengers, and even former enemies who couldn't help but admire the audacity of the Eclipse Dawn. Tales of Kayla's ingenuity and bravery became legend, transforming her from an unknown human into a symbol of defiance against oppression. For the crew of the Eclipse Dawn, life settled into a rhythm of cautious optimism. The ship was no longer just a vessel, it had become a beacon of hope for those who dared to resist tyranny. Refugees fleeing slavers, oppressed workers seeking freedom, and outcasts yearning for acceptance found their way to the Eclipse Dawn, drawn by stories of its fearless leader and her ragtag family of misfits. Kayla embraced this newfound role with quiet determination. She didn't seek fame or glory. Instead, she focused on using her influence to make a difference. With each stop at remote outposts and hidden colonies, she delivered supplies, shared knowledge, and inspired others to stand up for themselves. Her message was simple, yet powerful. Humanity, and any species willing to fight alongside them, was capable of greatness. One evening, as the Eclipse Dawn orbited a distant moon to refuel, Kayla stood in the observation deck, gazing out at the swirling colors of a nearby gas giant. The view was breathtaking, but her thoughts were far away. Elias joined her, leaning against the railing beside her. "You've changed," he said after a moment of silence. "Not just since I found you at that auction, but even since we took down Vrax." Kayla glanced at him, surprised by the observation. "How so?" "You're not fighting just for yourself anymore," Elias explained. "You're fighting for something bigger, for all of us." She nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. When she'd first boarded the Eclipse Dawn, survival had been her only goal. Now she realized her journey wasn't just about escaping captivity. It was about proving that humans could thrive, adapt, and inspire change in a universe that often dismissed them. "I never thought I'd end up here," she admitted softly. "Leading a crew, taking on slavers, being someone people look up to." "You earned it," Elias replied firmly. "Every step of the way." His words brought a small smile to her face. It wasn't easy carrying the weight of expectations, but she knew she wasn't alone. The bond she shared with the crew, the trust, loyalty, and camaraderie they'd built together, was her anchor. They weren't just teammates, they were family. As word of Kayla's exploits reached Earth, scattered human colonies began to rally behind her example. Stories of her triumphs ignited a sense of pride among humans living beyond their home planet, many of whom had grown accustomed to being overlooked or ridiculed by other species. Inspired by her courage, these communities started organizing themselves, pooling resources and forming alliances to protect their interests. One such group, calling themselves the Free Human Alliance, sent a message to the Eclipse Dawn. Their leader, a charismatic engineer named Mira Solis, requested a meeting. Intrigued, Kayla agreed, and soon the two women were sitting across from each other in the ship's common area. "We've been watching what you've done," Mira began, her voice filled with admiration. "You've shown us that we don't have to live in fear or shame. We can carve out our place in this galaxy." Kayla listened intently as Mira outlined her vision. A network of human settlements working together to establish trade routes, share technology, and defend against threats. It was ambitious, but Kayla saw the potential. If humans could unite, they might finally gain the respect they deserved. "I'll support you," Kayla said after a pause. "But remember, this isn't just about humans. It's about everyone who's ever been told they're worthless. Together, we can prove them wrong." Mira smiled gratefully. "Then consider us allies." In the months that followed, the Free Human Alliance flourished under Kayla's guidance. Settlements once isolated and vulnerable now thrived, bolstered by shared resources and mutual defense pacts. Aliens who had once mocked humans began seeking them out, eager to learn from their resilience and creativity. Artisans marveled at human music and literature. Engineers studied their innovative designs, and diplomats admired their ability to forge connections across cultural divides. Even the Galactic Concordance, a coalition of dominant species that governed much of known space, took notice. Representatives approached Kayla, curious about the sudden rise of human influence. At first their tone was condescending, treating her as little more than a novelty. But Kayla refused to be intimidated. "We aren't asking for permission to exist," she told them during a formal hearing. "We're demanding recognition, not because we're perfect, but because we're trying, because we refuse to let fear or hatred define us." Her speech resonated deeply, not just with humans, but with countless other marginalized groups who saw themselves reflected in her words. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. Humans were no longer seen as primitive or irrelevant. They were acknowledged as equals, capable of contributing to the galactic community in meaningful ways. Back aboard the Eclipse Dawn, the crew celebrated their latest achievement, a treaty signed between the Free Human Alliance and several alien factions, pledging mutual aid and cooperation. It was a monumental step forward, one that would shape the future of interstellar relations for generations to come. As the festivities wound down, Kayla retreated to the observation deck once more. This time, Elias wasn't there to join her. Instead, she found Rin tinkering with Scrapper, the drone that had played such a crucial role in their battles. The sight brought a bittersweet smile to Kayla's face. "Still fixing things, huh?" she teased gently. Rin looked up, her cybernetic eye glowing faintly in the dim light. "Always. Keeps me busy." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars drift past. Finally, Kayla spoke. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a difference?" she asked quietly. "If all this will matter in the long run?" Rin considered the question before answering. "Doesn't matter if it does," she said. "What matters is that we're trying. That's more than most people can say." Kayla nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Whether or not history remembered her name didn't matter. What mattered was the legacy she left behind, the spark of hope she had ignited in others. Years later, when historians wrote about the rise of humanity in the galactic community, they often pointed to Kayla as a turning point. Her story became a testament to the power of resilience, creativity, and unity. Children on distant planets grew up hearing tales of the human woman who had defied slavers, outwitted bounty hunters, and inspired a movement that changed the course of history. And though Kayla herself remained humble, content to continue exploring the stars alongside her chosen family, she couldn't deny the impact she had made. One night, as the Eclipse Dawn soared through uncharted space, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, listening to the hum of the engines. Somewhere out there, among the countless worlds and civilizations, humanity continued to shine. Not because they were perfect, but because they refused to give up, because they believed in themselves and in each other. And so, the galaxy learned that while humans may start with nothing, they always find a way to reach for the stars.